If you read between the lines, the establishment is clearly gearing up for more war. You're probably saying the same thing I am. When aren't they gearing up for more war? But I'm just here to point out the rhetoric has been ramped up to 11 in the last few months. And here it is. The focusing on Trump's every last little comment.
If it were any other candidate running against Hillary Clinton, this would be a pretty rough patch for Hillary Clinton.
While totally ignoring Hillary's obviously failing health and blatant corruption.
Clinton's honesty over her emails was called into question yet again after an interview she did with Fox. But the sheer number of unorthodox comments made by Trump just this week has really been a boon to the Clinton campaign. They'll admit it themselves.
In the last 5 days, this could easily have been Hillary Clinton's worst 5 days post-convention, and instead the exact opposite, and it's all due to Donald Trump's lack of self-discipline.
Is all fodder for keeping your attention on the left hand holding all the shiny things, so that you won't focus for too long on what the right hand is busy doing. And right now, that's putting the finishing touches on the war with Iran, which they've only been planning for decades now.
Bilderberg's agenda back at the 2014 meeting at the end of May and the beginning of June discussed the new architecture of the Middle East.
I mean, take a look at what we've got just here today in the mainstream propaganda mill. You had Time declaring that it looks like the U.S. and its allies have a new axis of evil in the Middle East. Syria, Iran, and Russia.
We need to make the Iranians pay a price in Syria. We need to make the Russians pay a price.
This pairs really nicely with all the headlines everywhere about how Russia is daring to use an Iranian military base to take off in its fight towards ISIS for the first time, even though A, Russia not only informed the US-led coalition it would be taking off from an Iranian military base, but B, the US-led coalition is who cleared the airspace for Russia to do so. See how that works? But then it comes over here, it gets into our mainstream media headlines, and they turn it into, oh my gosh, how could they do that? It's unfortunate. Come on, okay?
We're really worried here that the United States public is being led into another potential conflict with Iran, the similar way that we were led into the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, because you're starting to see the mainstream media really overhype the situation in Iran and omit important facts.
This is the same media who doesn't want to get into that silly argument about who created ISIS.
I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
With the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces.
I think the biggest risk that comes from Russia's operations in Syria is an accidental conflict or an accidental skirmish with the U.S.-led ISIS coalition.
You know, who fund, armed, and trained them.
And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union.
Let's not talk about that, and let's definitely not talk about the $1.7 billion, because that's just...
I think, Margaret, I guess the point that I'm trying to make, Margaret, is we could not possibly have been more transparent about this arrangement.
Why is that even relevant?
But the details, like you're saying yourself, it's new detail in an old story.
Yeah.
I guess clarifying the detail is what would help.
But why is that relevant?
And if you look at all the propaganda being fed to the American public right now, we've got the mainstream media oversaturation of coverage of the Iran situation.
In other words, get ready. Because while everyone's focusing on bread and circuses, the finishing touches are literally being put on America's next new war. Which will work out really well for Hillary, since the establishment worked really hard to ensure she's the nominee.
The work we did to prepare for Hillary Clinton to be our nominee and then make sure that we could get her elected president is absolutely critical to advancing the issues that are important. The work we did to prepare for Hillary Clinton to be our nominee, the work we did to prepare for Hillary Clinton to be our nominee.
Not only has she laughed about working real hard on bombing Iran,
done the way the administration's working on it now, which I totally agree with, then we ought to take them out.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, we're working hard. We're working hard.
I said at the end of the day may be next year. It will be next.
But during the 2008 campaign, she straight up said she'd go to war with Iran. So she's been planning this now for years.
Well, the question was, if Iran were to launch a nuclear attack on Israel, what would our response be? And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran.
And to make good on that promise today, Hillary has recently been courting Condoleezza Rice, James Baker, George Shultz, and Henry Kissinger. The Jeb Bush cabinet that never was. Or the George W. Bush cabinet that already was. basically saying, hey guys, vote for me, we'll all get rich with more war. And we know how much she likes to be rich.
Class family, I'm a rich guy.
And you know what? Rich people, God bless us. We deserve all the opportunities to make sure our country and our blessings continue to the next generation.
And let's face it, they need the money too, because the Pentagon just can't seem to find that pesky $6.5 trillion, which they couldn't account for in a recent audit when the Defense Finance and Accounting Service just couldn't seem to provide adequate documentation for $6.5 trillion worth of year-end adjustments to Army General Funds transactions and data. Oopsies. I mean, we can't just have audits. I mean, what is this, an exercise in transparency?
Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is?
Speaking of, American boots have now been confirmed on the ground in Libya. Not that most Americans even know how many countries the U.S. is currently bombing. And it's been pointed out that there is no congressional authorization for war in Libya, like they're even pretending that the Constitution matters anymore. Because that's right, we're in the nebulous never-ending war on terror. How'd we get here? I used to think Rudy Giuliani might say 9/11, but for an event we were repeatedly told to never forget, Mayor Noun Verb 9/11 apparently forgot 9/11.
Before Obama came along, we didn't have any successful radical Islamic terrorist attack in the United States.
Or at least he forgot what the official government narrative says about how 9/11 was done by Al-Qaeda, right? Well, if 9/11 wasn't done by Al-Qaeda like the official government narrative says, then maybe Rudy will enlighten us who was actually behind it. Meanwhile, I just had to throw this in there. The Turkish coup, which resulted in an ever-so-timely mass purge for a dictator who really wanted to eradicate any and all dissenters from his country by any means possible in the lead-up to said coup, has been blown wide open by a hardcore investigative journalist who found the secret codes used by the group behind the coup in a notebook.
Darbenin bir şifresi var gibi üzerinde hileler yazıyor ama sağlık ve silah, sağlık ve zırh, hava durumu, helikopter, motor ve silah gibi yine darbede kullanılan, darbe girişiminde kullanılan.
Yeah, actually those are just cheat codes for the video game Grand Theft Auto, which if the group had really used, I'm pretty sure they could have overthrown the Turkish government. Meanwhile, back here at home, the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations continue the global corporate subsidization of civil unrest, and the FBI co-opted new Black Panther Party is marching down the streets saying we are at war. The media wants them to say it's a civil war, but surprisingly, they actually redirected it to a war against police state tyranny. And let's face it, we do live in a country, after all, where class clowns can get arrested and strip searched for burping on purpose.
A federal appeals court upheld the arrest of an Albuquerque student for burping in class on purpose.
And then our courts will uphold that, citing state laws that prohibit people from interfering with the educational process of a school, and that educational process anymore appears to be social engineering, brainwashing, and the school-to-prison pipeline.
The number of police officers stationed full-time inside schools has increased by 1/3 between 1997 and 2007. Ostensibly, they were there to prevent mass school shootings like the one at Columbine, but they end up being a way for schools to basically outsource discipline to the police.
But they want them to say it's a civil war because they want us to fight against each other on race lines. But hey, it's anything to keep us fighting amongst ourselves while all of the wealth is sucked out of 99.99999999999% of the people in this country, and our real unemployment rate nears 30%.
The headline on Drudge right now is that 94 million people are not in the labor force currently. However, the Obama administration says that unemployment is only 4.5% of the entire population. Well, common sense will tell you that if 94 million people aren't working out of 324 million people, the actual unemployment rate in the United States is 29%.
You know, based on everything that's happening here in the U.S. with the mortgage crisis, the economy, the fact that most Americans are having problems just getting by day to day, the fact that the mainstream media is over-covering Iran only says one thing to me, and that's that the American public is being propagated into another war, Liz.
So we're going to have a never-ending war on terror. Iran's next up on that. And our corporate-funded civil war here at home. And what else? Oh yeah, don't let me forget the completely phony yet never-ending laughable joke that is the war on drugs, which will also continue indefinitely. Despite what your grandma said after watching Reefer Madness thinking it was a documentary, recent studies have actually shown that when marijuana is legalized, teens use it less. Except for Obama's daughter Malia, who was caught on tape smoking it at a music festival recently, which wouldn't be a problem except that America puts more people in prison per capita than any other country on the face of the earth. More than half of drug arrests are for marijuana. There's a huge economy built around putting people in jail for this. And her dad, the president, also smokes pot, hypocritically allows all of this to continue, as the DEA came out last week saying it would not loosen restrictions even on medical marijuana, declaring they refuse to reschedule the non-psychoreactive molecules, proving that the war on drugs is really just a war on Americans for corporate interests, as per the usual. And so the DEA, state police, and National Guard will continue to raid the gardens of 81-year-old cancer patients for growing 4 whole marijuana plants. Did you even know the National Guard assists in such raids? Well, now you do. Oh, and speaking of that, amongst the DNC WikiLeaks findings, it actually came out that it's the alcohol industry's lobby that's helping to ensure marijuana stays illegal. Gee, big fat stinking doo-doo surprise. That's it really. I think I'm just going to end this whole thing on big fat stinking doo-doo surprise. That and this awkwardly long hug between creepy Uncle Joe and Hillary.